In my experience, the most common problem for new relief print artists is inking. There are lots of guides on how to do proper inking, but to ink with confidence, it really helps a lot if you understand how the ink, the roller, the slab, and the block come together as factors in inking. We want to ink so that if we had an entirely uncut block, we could ink it and print a solid black over the whole area. If you can't do that, you can't faithfully represent a high contrast design appropriate to Linocut. In this video, I'm going to talk about what's really happening when we ink. Understanding these fundamentals of inking brings it under conscious control, rather than following simple instructions or guessing that eventually settles on a process. I don't imagine I'm the first that this principle ever occurred to, or even the first to publish about it, but it was a new idea to me, and I thought it might be new to you. Let's talk about three axioms in this theory of inking. When two surfaces are brought into contact, and at least one of them carries some amount of ink, the surface with the greater amount of ink will transfer ink to the surface with less, and leave them with equal quantities of ink. They'll divide the amount of ink that's in play. If they start with equal ink, they'll end the roll with equal ink without transfer. If two surfaces have equal amounts of ink, there will be no transfer. The amount of ink on a properly inked slab is not the amount that we need on the block to print properly. It's twice as much. This will become clear as we go along. Now, keeping that in mind, let's follow the whole process from slab to block. In the beginning, with proper inking, the slab has a proper full load of ink. I'll give you a research source to learn how to do that. When we roll a clean brayer across the virgin part of a slab, the roller and slab both end up with 1/2 of that original slab's ink load. That's because at the moment of contact, the slab and the brayer are sharing the amount of ink that's on the slab. And when two surfaces with equal amounts meet, there's no further transfer. Then we move to the clean block and begin to roll. For the distance of the first rotation, that's the diameter of the roller times 3.14 pi. The roller, meeting an uninked surface, gives up half its load. Since it began as 1/2 of what was on the slab, it transfers 1/4 of that to the block and retains 1/4. If we continue to roll onto an uninked area on the block with a depleted roller, it will, for that next rotation and beyond, deposit 1/2 of its depleted load, 1/8 of the original amount of ink on the slab. That's not very much. But continuing on to roll farther is fine. It tends to reduce the chance of stop-start roller marks. But keep your mind on the first rotation distance. Now let's assume that our block is less than 2 roller rotations wide. If we re-ink from a virgin part of the slab, we can now roll from the opposite side and complete the 1/4 inking of that distance across the slab. Or at least for the width of that roller anyway. But we want a full working amount of ink on the block. That amount for a correctly inked block is half of what we placed on the slab. I'll explain in a minute. But at this point, we have 1/4 of the slab amount laid down. And remember, each time that a roller with ink meets the block with ink, they divide the total of the two amounts of ink, no matter which starts with the greater amount. The block already has 1/4 of that full slab amount of ink that was on the slab. We now re-ink the roller back on a virgin part of the slab. The roller now has about 1/2 of the full amount that was on the virgin part of the slab, just as it was after the first time we inked it. We roll again. This time the quantity of ink in play is equal to 1/4 of the slab amount from the first roll, and 1/2 we just got from the slab, a total of 3/4. We know that will be divided between the two surfaces. So each surface now has 3/8 of the full amount, a bit less than 1/2, but we're getting there. Now we'll repeat this from the other side so that we have our full lane of block with 3/8 of the full slab amount of ink all the way down that lane. Now again, we re-ink the roller and start another cycle. This time the 3/8 already on the block meets the 1/2, which is always how we start with a freshly inked roller. The total ink involved is now 3/8 plus 1/2, or 4/8, for a total of 7/8. Nearly the full slab starting ink. But we're going to divide that between the two surfaces, the roller and the block, leaving ink with 7/16 of the slab amount. And ta-da, that's close enough to our goal of 1/2 the slab amount to print well. Remember that we cannot pull more than 1/2 of the ink off the slab. And we know that we cannot make ink transfer between two equally inked surfaces. So with about 1/2 a full slab amount built up on the block and 1/2 of a slab load on the roller, if we just rolled it, freshly inked it, no amount of rolling is going to make the ink on the block more than 1/2 of what was on the slab. It can't happen. You have 1/2 and 1/2, and they'll divide 1/2 each way. Nothing's going to happen. That's perfectly okay, because we have learned that half of the ink on the have learned that there's a certain amount that we can safely apply to a slab, and it's what we want on the block. Half of that is what we want on the block to print a dense black. We established our definition of a fully inked slab according to what we found prints well when half of that is on the block. The amount of ink on the slab is, in fact, the most ink we could have on the slab without creating a squiggly or a sloppy excess of ink that might make the roller skid and would result in an over-inked block. As it turns out, both the maximum correct starting ink on the block to print well and the desired 1/2 of that on the block to take ink from have about the same appearance, a finely grained matte surface. They look pretty much the same, and both appear very different from too much or too little ink. Now there are 3 lessons to remember out of this. Lesson 1, don't rush inking. Take time to ink each area of the block 3 times with a roller, each time freshly inked from a virgin part of the slab. Wow, now that eats up a lot of the ink we rolled onto the slab in proper amount. So we will from time to time have to re-ink the slab, pulling down ink from the reserve or applying new ink, taking care to create a proper ink layer that will pass our inspection. Don't try to re-ink an area of the block from the slab that's that's already had ink taken from it. You can easily see the difference in where a slab is virgin and where part of the ink has been removed. You do not want to reuse that area where part of it's been removed. In actual practice, we have to deal with things like minor irregularities in the block or slight mistakes in inking that we might have made along the way. So we typically do 3 passes over the whole block from both ways, top to bottom, and then do 3 passes both ways, side to side. When I say 3 passes, I mean passes over each part of the block, which is 1 rotation distance. And we're crossing those paths, up, down, left, right. So we must remember that if the block is more than 2 full rotations, wide or long, we need to address the central areas that will otherwise never see a roller with the desired amount, a full 1 of ink, which is 1/2 of the slab load. It can end up under inked. That's easily avoided by starting deliberately inking the center third or the center portion each in the same way we did the edges. I can go to that central portion that's between the first rotation from each edge, and now I want to deal with this center area. We can ink it in the way we've learned 3 times, each time with a freshly inked brayer. Now we can do the edges from one edge and from the other edge, 3 times each, always each stroke with a freshly loaded brayer. Now we can make those rolls full width when we're coming from the edges, even though we know we aren't fully inking beyond the first rotation. We're overrunning the ends of those 2 middle areas. We're moving up and overrunning it, and we're overrunning it this way when we roll full width from edge to edge. That eliminates the possibility of any stop-start marks, and you've seen those from time to time probably, where you saw, oh, this marks where the brayer stopped or started. If we did everything right, it's virtually certain that every part of the block has 1/2 of the beginning slab amount of ink. And that's the amount we need on the block to print properly. So we already know lesson 2. That's to always re-ink after each application. And make sure that in re-inking the roller, it's done from a fresh part of the slab, a virgin part of the slab from which we have not yet taken ink. Only then is a useful and predictable amount of ink being carried to the block. Notice, if we do that, if we re-ink every stroke, we know for sure when we go to the block that brayer is the same every time. It starts with 1/2 slab load. There's one more lesson, is lesson 3, and that's never fail to inspect slab after each application of ink. We pull down ink and we put new ink on and roll it out to what we think is the correct even surface. We need to look. We're looking for pieces of debris or areas that we might have brought too much ink down from and failed to roll it out sufficiently. And we want to inspect the block after it's fully inked, looking for debris again. It's far better to catch these issues before you end up throwing a proof in the garbage because there's a spot on it. Now, we don't have to follow this procedure exactly. What matters is that every part gets 3 passes each direction with a freshly inked roller. People approach this in many different ways. If you suspect you may not have fully inked some part because you can't really see, and you can't really see the difference between an almost sufficiently inked part of the block and a fully inked part of the block. They look so much the same. But you can do no harm at all by using freshly inked rollers on any part. So long as the ink is correct on the slab, you can't possibly over-ink an area by rolling it multiple times. You can't build the ink up beyond that 1/2 of the slab amount. It's not possible. Not unless the slab is over-inked. Note that I've been talking about smaller diameter rollers on these brayers, typically on a cheap one, a 1 1/4 inch diameter roller. That makes one rotation and gives up its ink in a bit less than 4 inches. Now, a 3-inch diameter roller has a rotation of just under 10 inches. We begin to see why busy printmakers and professionals prefer larger diameter rollers. A 4-inch diameter roller has a rotation of over 12 inches and can move across and lay a full load of ink across a 12-inch wide block. If your block is less than 1 full rotation, you need only roll 3 times to ink that width. And you'll probably want to do 3 times across to make sure. This, of course, requires a larger slab because when you are taking ink off the slab, you're no longer taking 4 inches of ink, you're taking 12 inches of ink. Bigger slab. Now, I'm not going to attempt to cover here how to recognize a properly inked slab and block, but you have to acquire that knowledge if you're going to print well. There's an excellent resource to proper inking and the appearance and the sound, which is useful, of proper inking. And it's a guide published by one of the mods at Reddit's printmaking group. I'm going to put a link to it in the description. It's helped a lot of people. It has what you're looking for, and it has video of what it looks like, what it sounds like. Most of us learn this eventually by trial and error. But if you think about these principles, you're going to have a better chance of saving time and errors, and you'll be better able to diagnose inking problems that might arise. You can do it haphazard, you can eventually learn how to do it, or you can think your way through it with this. But whatever you do, go for excellence. Go for dense, fully inked blacks. Don't settle for less. You're not doing the discipline any favors by putting out shoddy work.